Has COVID caused us to lose trust in everyone, the media, the government, and even your friends and family? And can you be blamed if that's true? Hello there, you glorious awakening souls. Thank you for joining me on this journey of self-acceptance and continuing progression. Let's have a look at how the COVID pandemic has affected our trust in media, our trust in government, and as a result, our trust in one another. People that are going back to work after long periods of time working in isolation suddenly ain't got no trust for one another. Think everyone's trying to snide them out of a penny piece, so they do. As companies have gone virtual during the coronavirus pandemic, supervisors wonder whether their remote workers are in fact working. New colleagues arrive and leave without ever having met. The longer employees were apart from one another during the pandemic, a recent study of more than 5,400 Finnish workers found, the more their faith in colleagues fell. It sort of shows you that actually we require contact and connection with one another. I know that myself personally. When I work with people remotely, I start to lose my baseline level of compassion for other people. But when I see them face to face, I realise, oh no, that's a human being. They've got all sorts of fears and requirements and doubts and assets and liability like anybody. You know, it isn't actually natural. These technological tools that we have are sort of remarkable, miraculous on some level of how they've helped us to achieve new states and things that could once not have been dreamed of in terms of the miracle of communication are now easy and taken for granted. But we have to remember who we are and how we've evolved and what we're supposed to do. And we have to remember that this pandemic situation, no matter where you stand on it politically or what you think about it medically or the regulations that have been brought in, it's been damaging. It's damaging to see your leaders have parties, and it makes you think, well, if the point of those regulations was to protect people because it's so dangerous to meet up, we shouldn't be doing it. Why are you doing it? Are you not frightened that you're not going to get that virus, that we're all being locked down in order to not get it or spread it? Why aren't you concerned about it? It makes you doubt and mistrust them. And also, when you live in a state of continual fear, whether you think that fear is legitimate and justified or you think that fear is being amplified, a state of fear is antithetical to harmony unless you can bond around a common purpose. And if you can't bond around a common purpose because you're all separate from one another, it's natural that mistrust occurs. Basic mistrust is an obstacle to evolution personally and socially. You have to have basic trust to advance out of what I would call pretty primitive states of awareness. If you basically don't trust people, and I've been guilty of that in my life. In the early part of my life, I generally didn't trust people. It took me a long time to feel like, oh, people are okay. They're trying their hardest, all those kind of things. I talked to Brené Brown about that one time, and she said she'd been on a similar journey from thinking people weren't trying their hardest to people sort of are trying their hardest. Even if you think they're doing a dismal job of their lives, they are trying their hardest. Now, if you're in a very unique situation where you're spending loads and loads of your time on your own, you can't communicate or connect with people, it's natural to sort of drift into crisis-based psychological states. And I think that's what a lot of us have been in. In March 2020, trust levels were fairly high. By May, they had slipped. It's funny, isn't it? Because trust level's got an arbitrary thing to measure. Trust is at an all-time high. That's 10 trust points per person. You know, it's abstract, and it's difficult to quantify, but I suppose these people must have methods. By October, about 7 months into the pandemic, the employees' degree of confidence in one another was down substantially. According to Pew, half of Americans believe trust is down because Americans are not as reliable as they used to be. Well, human beings are human beings, but our values and our principles, our cultural narratives surely define us. And we are at a time of very unusual and bifurcated narratives. People believe different things. Huge parts of the population vilifying other parts of the population for peculiar reasons, for peculiar abstract reasons. There ain't no real reason to vilify an entire group of people, really. It's not a helpful thing to do. In the past few years, Americans' trust in the government's handling of domestic problems has not strayed far from the record low of 35% in 2019. The latest 39% is statistically unchanged compared with last year's 41%. At the same time, trust in handling international issues has plummeted from 48% to 39% last year. And the recent events in Afghanistan likely have played a role in that decline. American politics has undergone a sort of a number of crises, really, and I think that people saw Trump as a kind of watershed. Of course, loads of people really love Donald Trump, and lots of people vehemently oppose and decry Trump's presidency. So it must be very disheartening for people that like Trump to not have Trump anymore, and for the many people that loathe Trump to see that really what's changed. When you see that Joe Biden is appointing as the head, or is nominated for the head of the FDA, someone that's worked for pharmaceutical companies, when you see that really things don't alter, that it's the perception of reality that governments and the media and big business are interested in controlling, and that there is a sort of a separate reality that they occupy, while most people are consigned to a lower level of reality determined by a sort of impotence and infighting and bickering. Overall, about 6 in 10 US adults say they have at least some trust in the information that comes from national news organisations. When it was last asked in late 2019, 65% expressed at least some trust. So trust is, generally speaking, in decline around our institutions, and our institutions are what define our nations. Our nations, as you know, are just conceptual, a flag, some territory, and some ideals. Essentially, the paraphernalia of a story. The story of England, an old story. The story of France, an old story. The story of America, comparatively new story. But what helps us to feel anchored in these realities are faith that we have a shared set of beliefs with the other members of a society. As long as we're continually turned against one another in order to maintain power, as long as that's what's required to keep a large number of people from coming together to overthrow a smaller group of people who benefit from the general atmosphere of mistrust, we're going to continue in this unpleasant, turgid stasis that we find ourselves in. How we experience it as individuals is mistrust, generally speaking. Like my first feeling sometimes when encountering a new person is that I can't trust them. And it takes me a little while to go, no, this is just a person like you. This is something we can work on. There have been people where you know how you sort of really believe your instincts are good, and I hope your instincts are good, and I think my instincts are good, but I can think of occasions where I thought, I'm not sure I like that person. When in time I've gone, that person's all right, they're okay. And I think it's good to have an optimistic view of human beings. Yes, the point of not trusting someone is prevention of them exploiting you, right? That's the point in not trusting. If you don't trust someone, you don't give them the opportunity to exploit you. But there is a price to be paid for that also. I think transparent communication and openness is the way to trust. And then you have to grant people trust. And the consequences of that will sometimes be that people betray you or let you down. But there are consequences too to living without trust. I've tried that way of living. Now, and it's a practice rather than something I've perfected, I like to operate on the basis that people are fundamentally good and give them some trust. And when I find myself drifting back to, I don't like those people, they can't really, I think, oh no, you're doing that thing again where you're not trusting people. So in spite of the evidence and the obvious fact that our institutions are behaving in accordance with a set of values and principles that are, to say the very least, I think, in bad faith, let us as individuals try our best to treat each other with openness, clemency, kindness, open hearts, and good faith. Because, I believe consciousness, the experience of being here as an individual, seemingly, is a fundamental component of reality. And if we can alter that, then we can ultimately alter reality, certainly for ourselves, and perhaps over time, progressively, accumulatively, reality in general. Have you lost your trust in institutions, the media, the government? Has it affected your trust of family members and friends? Let me know in the comments below what kind of consequences you've personally experienced as a result of COVID. How have you felt let down? Are you let down when you see parties take place or regulations take place or be enacted that aren't obeyed by people that made those regulations? What effect does it have on you? And what techniques are you doing to make sure that you don't get dragged down into the mire by those that govern us and lead us in bad faith, that those that give us our narratives when really we know they are in cahoots with people that benefit from certain systems and sets of regulations? Let me know in the comments below, because we're going to learn from one another. We're on this path together. No one's better than you. No one thinks they're cleverer than you. Certainly I don't. So let's go forward together, learn together, and please stay free.